We want to see what you're eating.
Same.
Everybody's having lunch, huh? Hi, Jim.
Looks like a
Okay.
sandwich.
Half, yeah.
I imagine y'all are recognizing our wonderful special guest voice here that's joining us today. We have Jay Schafer to help give us some insights from his vast experience. And I'm going to let people, we have about just a couple of minutes more to let folks come in. So I will go ahead and share my screen and then we'll get started. But as always, it takes me a while to figure out the wonders of Zoom.
Did you say you were counting on me for insight?
Yeah, come on
Oh
now.
my God. Gonna have to wing it.
Uh, So I think she spelled it S-I-T-E rather than S-I-G-H-T. So
Hmm.
all you have to do is be here.
All right.
No, we're
Okay.
What topics do you normally discuss at the virtual coffee bar?
Last time we had a one of our volunteers is also a vocalologist, which is basically she has her doctorate in vocal cords and voice therapy and speech therapy and all those good things. And she did, how to take care of your voice because, of course, we use them a lot. And so that was really neat. But sometimes we do, other things about picture description, which is always fun too. So I always think about Susan Sandberg, she could make you see where you were in an art museum when you were listening to the radio, but our readers do that quite a bit as well. So yeah, it's lots of varied topics. We've also talked about, different books from the perspective of persons that have low vision, and that allows us to kind of learn a little bit more about our population. So lots of different fun topics.
I
Um,
have I have a little trick to share.
yeah.
It's an exercise that was shown to me many decades ago,
Okay.
and it was to try to limber up your tongue and to help you with diction and enunciation.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't require a number two leaded pencil, but it does require a pencil
Okay.
if you have a
What's a
pencil.
pencil?
It could be a pen, but if
maybe.
you take a pencil and you put it in your mouth like this, and then you
Okay.
try to and then you try to read something.
Okay.
The import the importance of net neutrality in news delivery.
Mm,
Now,
um,
why would you want to do this? Because what this does is it forces your tongue to dart above the pencil and below the pencil, and it really kind of works your mandible and your tongue. And after trying to read like this for a while, you'll find it very liberating to remove the pencil. And in theory, you should be able to speak a little bit more clearly. And I always love that, so especially if you're early in the morning, you got to read to people. That's
you
you
got
may
it.
not even you may not even talk to anyone until you turn on that microphone or your recording device. And anyhow, it's just a little something to get your tongue to limber up. So,
Do you think that will help with speed? Because lately, the last couple of weeks I've done my readings, I've had to fit about 12,000 words into about a 9,000 word hour.
oh,
Mhm.
that's tough. I would edit down that article if I could. Um, I don't think it helps with speed. It just helps a little bit with limbering up your tongue so you can pronounce things better.
I'll certainly
All
try.
right. Well,
Well, Jay, I've got two more people joining us real quick, so
sure,
I'm
sure.
gonna let them come on in here. We do have a lot of people in the room. Would you like me to have folks go around and introduce themselves, or should we just jump in?
Sure, I'd like to hear who all these fine people are. Some of them I know, like Carl Graves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's start with Carl then. Since there are several of us in the room, and to kind of keep it tight, and I know some of you really read lots of different things, but I would love it if you would share your name and where you're at, so where you are located, and then one thing that you read, one newspaper that you read, or one program that you do, rather than six. I know that's going to be hard for you, Carl, so show us the way. You start first.
Carl Graves. I'm recording from home in my house, and the, the thing I do I'm most proud of is the environmental news program I do once a week.
All right. Thank you, Carl. Okay, how about you, Byron?
Hello, I'm Byron Buckner in Kansas City, Missouri. Uh, I, along with Rose Onwuke, produce the African American Hour, and I got the sub in the newspapers of Southeast Kansas last week.
Thank you, Byron. Okay, Michael Schafer, how about you? That's you.
Michael is muted.
There we go. That I'm known as Muted Mike. Um, so I'm Michael Shopper. I'm in Overland Park. I do the breakfast table times on Sunday morning for the Kansas City Star.
All right. How about you, Janie, and then Rosemary?
Hi, I'm Janie Jones. I record from my basement in Topeka, and I record the Wichita Eagle on Thursdays.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, hi. This is Rosemary Anquay. I read along with Byron, the African American Hour. I record from my office in Northern Virginia. So I'm a little bit far from you guys.
All right. How about you, Deb and Pam?
I'm Deb Kermer from Topeka, and I record the Kansas City Star on Thursdays.
I'm Pam Bloom from Lawrence, and I do the Northeast Kansas City papers. So the Atchison, Leavenworth, Platte County, Missouri, and Weston, Missouri. And I also read books.
Do you read the Fort Leavenworth Lamp?
No. It sounds like it would be interesting, though. My son works on Fort Leavenworth as a civilian employee after having served there for quite a few years when he was active duty.
Well, thank him for his service.
Well, thank you.
And Jay is a Kansas history buff, as well as just Kansas, know all things Kansas. So most of the time when people talk about the papers that they read for audio reader, they're papers that people do not know. They can be those very obscure papers, but Jay would know. Okay, we've got two more folks left. Oh, I'm sorry, three. We've got John, Jim, and then Michael, the other Michael Gear.
Well, actually, it says John. It's Jack Wilson. I read
I know Jack.
10 years. Well, and you admit it. I read for 10 years, and 5 years ago, my sight started to go, and I'm not quite blind, but I'm working on it. And this is the first time I've been back listening to the coffee hour in about 2 years, because I'm going to fight like hell to get back and read. So I used to read on Thursday afternoons for a couple of hours in the studio, and I now do it from my little office out here at Washington Creek Lavender. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Yes, glad to have you. Welcome, welcome. Okay, Jim and Michael Gear, close us out.
Okay, Jack, glad to have you back. I didn't realize it's been 2 years since we'd had the pleasure of having you among us.
Thank you.
So I'm Jim Huber. I'm reading, as I always do, we're doing this from my kitchen table in Overland Park. And I'm going to need this session very desperately because on Thursdays I read the Anderson County Review, which is based in Garnett.
Yep. I hear that, Jim. Thank you.
Okay, and I am Michael Gear. I am reporting to you from the far northern reaches of Kansas City, Missouri. And the most interesting new thing that I read is the Children's Hour science show every other Saturday.
Ooh, what fun.
It is fun.
Okay, and I don't want to forget that Nick Carswell has joined us too. So say hey, Nick.
Yeah, hi. I don't read a whole lot for unless there's something gone horribly wrong. No, but I'm the program director and happy to be here. And I do want to say hi, Jack. It's been a long time.
Hello,
Welcome.
Nick. Thank
Good to
you.
see
It
you.
has.
Good to see you.
And congratulations on your awards. My goodness.
Thank you very much.
Written by Emma Lofhagen and published in the Guard.
Oh,
Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and switch it over here. I'm going to share my screen one more time so y'all can see this. I do want to just say that we are very lucky to have Jay Schafer with us today. And as many of you know, you can recognize his voice from KPR, but he is the news director over there and the managing editor. And of course, he has been with just about any of the radio networks that you can think of. And so we're just glad that he can be here with us today and share some of his insights. That's right, spelled with the GH in there. And yeah, the one thing I want to throw out there too is that as we get into this, it's just a reminder that we are always to be the eyes and not the brain. And so this is a chance for us to have some conversation about that. And as Jim sort of mentioned as a lead in, I'm just going to show some of those, we work with something from the Kansas City Star, but we also are going to be working with things from the Topeka Capital Journal, as well as your hometown there, Jay, the Great Bend Tribune. And, even smaller, we'll be looking at things
and published in the Guardian
from the Mercury, the Manhattan Mercury, or even, the Seneca Courier Tribune. So we really have a wide gamut of things that we're doing. So it makes a difference that we, keep neutral. But how do we do that? So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now and turn over to Jay and say thank you again for being with us and look forward to the conversation.
Well, and thanks to all of you for being readers for Audio Reader. And I know many of you have been doing it for a long time. Obviously, you do very important work here. And as I learned many years ago when Janet Campbell was running the show, not just anyone can volunteer at Audio Reader. They make you take a test, and I saw the test, and I thought, ooh, I don't know if I can pass that test. Luckily, I didn't have to because they had other volunteers to read. But the work you do is quite important, and I want to talk just briefly about the importance of neutrality in news delivery. It is utterly important to read/report facts objectively without personal bias, emotional coloring, or political agendas. And why is that? Well, because listeners gauge the credibility and reliability of the news that you report by how you report it. Now, your voice is a tool, as I'm sure many of you know, so it's important to use it wisely. Listeners will hear and interpret your voice intonation, your inflection, your pauses, your cadence, and they can detect dismissive tones just like you can when you're arguing with your spouse. And I'll share more on that in a moment. So please, no heavy sighs. I wish my spouse was on this call. No heavy sighs, no sarcastic tones, no editorial comments, because we want to be the eyes for listeners, but not their brain. Let them use their own brains. No one cares if you love or hate President Biden or President Trump, or if you love anything really or dislike anything. And so we don't want that to come across in what we read. In an ideal world, when someone hears you talking, they will not be able to detect who you voted for, who you like, who you don't like, what you think of property taxes going up or down. It doesn't just have to be political. Everything we read, we should try to have that gold standard of reading it in a way that no one's going to be able to tell what I think about this story. Now, we're all human. We all have our own personal biases. We just want to try to keep that away from the microphone because we're not having coffee with our best friend and discussing politics or local government or taxes or the school bond issue. So just be cognizant of that, and just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean that everybody feels that way. And I think that's what we just have to keep reminding ourselves, because it's not about us, right? It's not about you. It's about the people you're reading to. And people are counting on you to read to them as fairly, objectively, and as dispassionately as possible. And that can be tricky because, again, we all bring our own personal biases to the table. But listeners deserve to hear facts reported objectively so they can interpret events and form their own conclusions independently, rather than being told what to think. That is, after all, the American way. And if you want to give your opinion on the news, start your own podcast and let people subscribe, and then they can hear what you have to say. But as you know, and I'm sure you've been told many times before, Audio Reader is here to read the news, even the opinion news, but in a fair and impassioned way. Don't tip your hand with your voice, and we can all do that. And I'm going to give you just an example. Just by the way that I'm using my voice, my spouse can tell when I'm being sarcastic, when I'm exaggerating, and sometimes when I'm telling a little white lie. We all have little tricks we can do. And my wife does it to me. Whenever she's irritated with me, this is what I hear. That big intake breath. And I know you are tempted sometimes when you read something. Well, now what's going on in Washington, D.C.? It's human. It's very human to deep sigh, but we need to try to refrain from that. Chit-chat between spouses is far different than delivering the news, so please bite your tongue. Again, no one cares what you think about the news, so don't let them know what you think. I know this can be difficult, but we just have to try to keep it at the forefront. Have I ever been guilty of tipping my own hand? I have. It's usually been rather innocuous, but I should slap myself when I do it, because people are listening. People are listening to you, and sometimes they're listening to me. I remember promoting a story on the air, something coming up on Morning Edition. The Olympics was going on. It was about figure skating, and I don't care about figure skating. So I know I couldn't help myself. I said something along the lines of, and coming up in 10 minutes on Morning Edition, Olympic figure skating. In other news, that was totally inappropriate, but it wasn't political, so maybe I kind of felt like I could get away with it. Well, I got an earful later. Hey, I love figure skating. I kind of thought you did too. Why else would you put it on the air? It just created a whole thing, and it opened a whole can of worms. And that was kind of it was ice skating. It wasn't, political news or who's running for president. And I probably shouldn't have done it. And I am often reminded, again, by my spouse, if I wander off the reservation, so to speak. And I remember I was delivering a story. Remember the balloon that went across the United States, and we were told it was a Chinese spy balloon. China said it was a weather balloon. Well, I must have taken a pause when I was talking about that story, because I said blah, 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 blah. The United States government believes this is a Chinese spy balloon. The Chinese say it is a weather balloon. So I put a pregnant pause in there. That's kind of letting everybody know I'm pretty sure it's a Chinese spy balloon. But that's not my business to do that. And I shouldn't have done it. I did it. We've all probably done something. I'm just here hoping to encourage you to put yourself on guard and remember it's not about you, and it's not even about you being funny or cute. I'm so glad I'm part of this meeting so I can hear myself talk. It's about you reading the news as the news is printed in the best way possible. Does that make sense? Everybody raise a hand. Can I get an amen from someone? I mean, I'm sure you've been the recipient of this sermon before from other people at Audio Reader, program director like Nick Carswell, other people that have held that position. And you've seen the test and you've been given the instructions. But after you've been doing it for years and years, sometimes I'm sure you just want to roll in and record it the way you want to record it. Or if you're recording from home, you just want to do it the way that you want to do it. I'm just asking you to try to be on guard. Put yourself on the other side of that microphone. Become the recipient. How would you want someone to read this to you who doesn't agree with you? Does that make sense? So be as neutral as possible at all times. What did you have on that graphic, Trish? We want to be the ears for our listeners.
The eyes.
I'm sorry, the eyes for our listeners, but not their brain. Right. That's a great, you can boil down everything I have to say in that one little phrase, because that is the mission here, no matter what we're reading.
And I'll throw out there, Jay, one thing we really encourage folks to be friendly and warm, and to be that connection. So I would think in your role, there is a struggle of balancing that component, and where do you find the line between,
So I gave that some thought too, because we all have different personalities, and listeners will make a connection with you because of your personality. But any kind of personality you interject into your copy should be relegated to things like the grocery ads or gardening news, real innocuous topics. I mean, I kind of thought ice skating was rather innocuous, but a lot of people like it, so, don't make fun of the figure skating. Or the curling, which is another thing that just tickles me. There are a lot of fans out there of some of these things that we might want to make some kind of a comment on. So understand your audience and understand your material. If you're reading material, again, the gardening section of the Lawrence Journal World and how to grow tomatoes, you can have a little personality and a little fun with that, because that is subject appropriate. What's not appropriate is how we all feel in our personal politics, or about what local elected leaders are doing to us or for us, as the case may be. So I think then, Trish, it's okay. Depending on the subject matter, it can be a little lighthearted. People realize you're a real live human being, and, they probably know you're volunteering to read this to them. So if you can build that relationship with your voice on those things where it's okay a little bit to have a little fun, I think that's entirely fine. I don't know if I'm towing the company line here on that, but I think it's material driven. If you're reading politics and serious news, the hard news, just try to play it straight. And if it's the lifestyle section, or maybe even to an extent celebrity news where it's not that serious, I think you have a little bit more freedom. Is that fair?
Well, Jay, if you don't mind, I was going to make sort of a commentary, a question comment about when the news is less sort of hard hitting. And one of the examples I was going to give was the small town newspapers, almost to a paper, love getting more sort of dramatic when Halloween comes around. Mm-hmm. The Halloween stories tend to have a personality to them. And I found myself trying to interject a little personality into that read, because I just can't imagine doing a read that's, supposed to start with a spooky sort of setup in a newsman's monotone.
I think for Halloween, that's the kind of material that I think is probably okay to do. So I'd like Nick to weigh in here, but I think, if you're talking about the Niwala Festival down there in southeast Kansas, I mean, you could have a little fun with that. That's a big deal for those people. So you don't want to be disparaging of it, of course, but no, I think that's probably okay, Michael.
I played the trumpet in the Niwala Festival 45 years ago in a marching band. So
get out. It's a big deal. You've been part of it. That thing was started more than 100 years ago to keep those knucklehead teenagers from getting into trouble. That's the whole reason for that parade down there.
See, there's that Kansas historian. We got it going on. Thank you. Yeah, that's
We're
perfect.
only 20 minutes in. I can't wait to see what's going to be unearthed with this hour. I just say I like all that, and I think the distinction to me is, where is this coming from? Is it coming from the material itself? Again, is it true to that idea that you're the eye? So I think the distinction, what we don't want to see, is adding things that are apropos of nothing, or represent views that are not, on the page or in the article or in the feel and the language and the tone of the writing. Yeah, I like it.
Who here was reading Fort Leavenworth and Leavenworth?
That's
Okay.
Pam.
Pam.
Well, actually, lots of folks probably read the Leavenworth Times.
All right. Well, we've got such a small group here that I'm going to throw out a few little facts. It's not germane to this discussion we're having, but you might be interested. I just got back from Fort Leavenworth because Rex Buchanan, one of our commentators on KPR, Rex and I have started an occasional Kansas travel series where we go to these interesting places and then, turn it into a report. The first place we went to was Caw Point Park, the confluence of the Kansas and Missouri rivers in Kansas City, Kansas. A wonderful park. Well, the next episode, which is running this Friday, we go to Fort Leavenworth, because it is at Fort Leavenworth that you can see the wagon ruts for the Santa Fe Trail and the Oregon Trail. It's a little bit convoluted to get to. But while you're at Fort Leavenworth, if you jump through the hoops that you have to jump through to get on base, unless you have a military ID, you can go to the Frontier Army Museum, and we visited that too, and that is pretty darn cool. Fort Leavenworth's a pretty cool town to begin with, but anyhow, if you've never been to the Frontier Army Museum, here's why you should go. You can see the black carriage that Abe Lincoln rode in December of 1859 when he visited Kansas. And you can see the little pitcher that they poured beer from that Abe Lincoln supposedly drank. I just think that's kind of cool as far as museums go. And again, if you go to the base, you have a military ID, no problem. If you don't, you're going to have to do it, online beforehand, get your little visitor's pass, and you'll be good to go. So that's all. I just wanted to share something about Fort Leavenworth because it's so cool.
Sounds awesome.
If you like history.
It also helps if you know someone who has a military ID to get you on.
Yes, it does. It's such a great historic place. People whose only knowledge of Fort Leavenworth comes from, movies or TV shows, they think it's just one big prison. But it does have a prison, but it's so much more than that. The prison's certainly important. There's about 500 wayward soldiers and members of the military locked up there, but there's so much else to see, not only at Fort Leavenworth, but in the city of Leavenworth. So if you haven't been there for a while, I would encourage all of you to go.
No doubt.
Anybody have any questions about neutrality?
Yeah. I was just going to throw it out there. Does anybody have any questions or things that have popped up for them before that has given them struggles?
I know I sometimes get some pretty people that are on different sides of my political viewpoints, and I do try to just read them as I would expect them to want it to be read.
That's the way to go.
Yeah, I even when I'm totally disagreeing, I'm gritting my teeth and just reading along.
Yeah, I sometimes feel like listeners can definitely hear you smile, or they can detect that. I don't know if they can detect eye rolling. Maybe. So let's try to stay away from that too. But try your best. You're all volunteers. You're kind of professional volunteers. You all had to take a pretty hard test to get this gig, which is crazy because I want to be a volunteer. Well, you have to take this test first. It's a very respectable volunteer job. If Audio Reader could afford it, they'd probably pay you too, but of course they can't afford it. They don't have any money. So thank you all for, doing it and doing such a fine job. I'm sure you're going to get complaints from time to time, as we all do, and take whatever constructive criticism, even if it's not constructive criticism, and read it for what it is and try to digest it, see if it's fair criticism of your performance. I mean, when thousands and thousands of people are the recipients of what you're reading, you're bound to get some complaint. You mispronounce somebody's name wrong. I can't imagine the poor folks that have to read obituaries from small towns that they're not familiar with. I mean, that's just one of my first jobs in radio was reading Sunday morning obituaries on the radio. It was one of these small town radio stations. By golly, you better get those names right.
Now, CJ, we ask them, this is maybe easier or maybe worse. I don't know, but we ask our folks to actually spell the name if they don't know how to pronounce it.
That's good too.
That's our technique because we're doing the, read as written. So it helps. But we also say chosen and then confident. Choose your pronunciation and then be confident. But I do have a question for you that's in the chat. Michael is asking, how do you add neutrality in the opinion section of a newspaper when it is written from a non-neutral position? So let's say you're maybe it might be reading a quote for you, but if you are doing something that's obviously you're reading it and it obviously has an opinion, how do you approach that?
Kind of a tough nut to crack there, but again, I would look at it like I would look at anything else of a serious nature that's possibly inflammatory to some and well received by others. I don't think you mess around with that. I know we've had some readers in the past, and they will remain nameless, who have put a little emphasis on certain things. Dear editor of the Lawrence Journal World, I cannot stand the mayor. I mean, we don't have to be animated. I think we can just read it. Just read it as you would read almost anything else in as dispassionate a way as possible. I don't think we need to add the emphasis that a letter to the editor or an op-ed column might include. I think we just try to do our best just to read it.
Yeah. Okay.
Jack, are you raising your hand over there? Are you saying you object? Jack Wilson, are you saying you disagree, or am I reading your body?
No, I totally agree. I can remember when I was reading the telephone reader in the very beginning after I had just passed my test, and I had an obituary with someone's name that I had to read it 9 times because every time I get through it, I'd start to laugh. I could not. I could not do it. And I'd have to go back and start all over. And luckily it was on the phone and I could do that. And finally, I literally had to bite my finger before I went to read this. It was like Bumble snort something or other. And I could not, I had to give the importance to someone's obituary that it deserved. And so I had to pronounce it correctly, and I certainly couldn't laugh. But it was it was probably one of the toughest jobs I've ever had when it's come to reading like that, getting that right. But it was 9 times. I was so happy. An hour later, I was happy I had done it.
Trish, to what extent do people have the time to pre-read some stuff? Is that? I know the live
Jay,
reads. It's probably
we say that usually when a person produces 1 hour of a show or 1 hour of recording, it generally will take twice that amount of time to produce it. So in other words, we hope that folks will take a half an hour at the front of their read to kind of go through, at least scan, if not, I mean, most folks don't have time to read everything first, but at least to scan it, look for things that are awkward pronunciations, things that are unknown to them. And to be honest with you, Jay, love the journalists out there in the world, but some of those small town papers, they don't have an editor. They don't have anybody. They're doing it all on their own. And so sometimes things are really worded not as professionally as we would like, but we make it work, right? We read it as written and we try to make it make sense as best we can. But yeah, I would say that we usually are asking folks to scan and look for those hard spots. But no, we don't anticipate that folks are really going to have time to read everything before they're able to, finish it without spending 5 hours on a 1 hour show.
I hear you. And reading copy cold can be dicey, as they say. But I think people can be, or I think in general, people are fairly forgiving of mistakes or a mispronounced last name. What they're not going to be forgiving of is if they can tell that you hate Donald Trump or you love Donald Trump. They're gonna. You could just tell. You could tell. And sometimes even amongst my brethren, I can tell when, national newscasters and whatnot, I can pretty much tell who they voted for. And I really shouldn't. I don't want to know. I don't want people to know my personal opinion about this, that, and the other. Now, if we're pretty good friends and we're in the parking lot and you're asking me what I think about something, maybe I'll tell you. Certainly not going to get on the air and tell tens of thousands of people, and you shouldn't either.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely.
Other questions?
Well, anybody else have any other questions they want to share?
Well, I don't know if it's so much a question or if there's even really a solution, but I did want to mention that the thing that I talked about earlier, where I found lately that in the Southeast Kansas newspapers, generally I have much more than an hour's worth of material to get through to deal with the local news that's available to me. And that means editing down, and that takes some time. And I think you're right, Trish. It does take me about an additional 30 minutes to be able to do the hour-long program, to be able to read through. But I have to try really hard to be cognizant that I'm not cutting out the things that I don't find important.
Right.
Some articles I just can't cut because there really is that much valuable local news that's in it. So I have to go cut something else. And at the end of the day, I am making an editorial decision myself. What's important enough for me to share in the time that I have available?
Yeah, that's a tough road to hoe, but good on you for being aware of that fact. I'm going to have to lose some of this material. What is the thing that I can cut that will cause the least damage to the listeners who want to hear the whole paper or the whole article or whatever? That's good that you're thinking of that. And sometimes that's the best we can do is think, if I'm living in, West Mineral, Kansas, what's the thing that I have to know about Big Brutus, the world's largest electric shovel that still exists? Or what can I leave, on the cutting room floor? It's good that you're thinking about, we should all be thinking about that, because sometimes you do have to edit things away and lose the less important stuff. In newspaper, they talk about the inverted pyramid, it's got to have the most important thing. You got to get that. It's like the headline, and then everything else is just kind of, the very last comment of a story. You may be able to lose that, and it's not going to hurt the story because you're getting the gist of the information out there. For anybody who's not familiar with the inverted pyramid, it's getting to the most important thing at the top, and then the details get smaller and less significant as that story is written or as it unfolds. I mean, that's how we're taught to write them, I should say. And probably as you're reading them, the first several paragraphs of whatever story you're reading are probably pretty important. Is the last paragraph that important? I don't know. You'll have to read it. But somewhere in the middle or toward the end is the stuff you can cut. I mean, that's probably pretty obvious to you guys who've been reading material for a long time.
I really appreciate you saying that, Jay. We often talk about when we do have to edit, as you're mentioning, Michael. And Michael reads a program that covers 4 different papers in 1 hour. And so, our first priority is definitely that local content. But I also want to acknowledge that we have an extra qualifier to us, Jay, that I think you can get away with. We have to tell our listeners what's on that cutting room floor because of, equity. So if I cut that article down, I have to say, this has been abbreviated, and we don't want folks trying to be the journalist to summarize or paraphrase, because that really can quickly lead to commentary. Yeah. But instead, just reading that first 3 paragraphs and saying, I'm going to abbreviate this article. There's a lot more here to share. But due to time, I'm going to jump to the end. Or
in the interest of brevity, this story has been modified in the fairest way possible that I know how to do. So
yeah, exactly.
I think that's good to have a little disclosure, because you're letting listeners know you've tweaked this in some way. And if it's super, super duper important to them, they'll find a friend, a neighbor, or somebody, or maybe even somebody at Audio Reader. Hey, can you give me that whole article? I'm very interested in it. Could you read the whole thing to me? Just call me on the phone. I mean, I'm sure that's happened.
It does, actually.
But for the broadcast, I think to make an acknowledgement, I have had to truncate some of this story, or I think whatever verbiage you use is a good nod to the listener. It helps with transparency and honesty, and it helps you build your credibility. If you're going to tell me up front you've had to modify this story in the interest of brevity and due to time constraints, and as someone mentioned earlier, you can only talk so fast. And I am one of the slowest talkers in the world. I mean, you get a lot more news listening to somebody else than me, because I'm a slow reader most of the time. But I'm also a slow hearer. I think that's by default, is read it as slowly as, not painfully slow, but fairly slow, so people can digest it. Yeah.
Thank you, Jay, for saying that about transparency, because that is definitely one of the components that we really do try to encourage and keep forward. Because if I skip the paragraph that I don't like, then that brings it back to being about me, But
well, actually, Trish, if you don't mind, what will turn out to be a question this time about that. And Jay, thank you for mentioning the inverted pyramid. I've noticed that some of the reporters that I read are better than others at formatting their articles in inverted pyramid style. Sometimes it turns out the really important bit was in the last paragraph. But my question would be this: when I'm editing and summarizing some of my articles, I found that especially some of my reporters are pretty good at this format, which is first paragraph has the context for the whole article, and then the reporter writes a paragraph with whatever the next concept is, and then they have a quote from somebody that directly paraphrases what the reporter just said.
Yep.
And then they have another paragraph where the reporter says whatever is important in the next concept. And then they have a quote from somebody that says exactly what that paragraph just said.
I'm cutting the quotes myself.
And that's what I'm doing, is cutting the quotes. And I want to make sure we're okay with that idea.
I mean, in an ideal world, we wouldn't, but we don't live in an ideal world. I think you got to cut the quotes that are essentially echoing what the reporter has already written. I think the reporter, in many of those cases, is just trying to buttress whatever they've written, and then so-and-so said this, which follows on the heels of whatever I just said as the reporter. But that's probably what I would do, Michael. I'm losing the quotes that aren't adding that much to this story. Now, if it's a really inflammatory or important quote that the mayor said or the senator said or whoever, I might try to work that in, but maybe not the whole quote, just the exciting part. And that's why I will not raise taxes. Although not read like I just said it. The senator said that's why he won't raise taxes.
There you go. Love it.
Yeah. I'm feeling very animated today. I think I've had too much coffee. What other questions, comments, concerns?
There is one other question in the chat from the other Michael, Michael Schafer. Let's see, this is off topic. I have some information on local history. Example, Eudora. How can I contact Jay with this information for your program? For example, did you know that there is an outdoor bowling alley and mineral springs in Eudora?
I did not know that.
Hey.
Janet Campbell, my former boss, lives there. I wonder if she knows that. The best way to reach me is to send me an email at the letter J, SCHAFER, J Schafer at ku.edu, or Trish has my email. So
sure,
she can get
I can forward on something if you want to send it to me, that'd be great too. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, then I just want to say thank you, Jay. This has been wonderful. I really have enjoyed our opportunity to hear a little bit more. And you are right. We do harp on this. We do. I appreciate your echoing of the importance because I think sometimes, as you said, Jay, we do it for quite a while. I'm thinking some of our folks here have been reading for, 25, 35 years, and so that can be easily forgotten.
Yeah, hopefully, and I think this is true. This is really just a refresher / reminder. We want to read to people as we would want them to read to us, not knowing anything about them. They don't know anything about us. So, as neutral as possible. That wins the day, and that brings listeners back. And I think that helps build up your credibility and makes people want to listen to you no matter what you're reading. If they're interested in that community or that topic, they can count on you to read it to them in the most honest way possible.
Yep, you got it. Well, it's been a pleasure to have everybody here. I'm seeing lots of thank yous in our comments here as well. So yeah. Sorry I didn't have any virtual coffee for you, Jay. I guess I'll have to work on that.
You really need to improve this whole meeting. We're going to need some snacks next time.
Coffee, snacks. Will do.
Well, thanks for all you do, audio reader volunteers.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jay.
Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Hey, Jay, you did not fill out my bingo card today. I have to say, I'm sorry about that. You didn't mention the Bloody Benders.
The Bloody Benders. We're still looking for them, and their treasure.
I grew up just a couple of miles from there, actually.
There have been some updates on that over the years, but to my knowledge, no one's ever found treasure, and no one knows what happened to them when they took off.
That's right.
Is that about where we are?
That's where we are the last I knew, yeah.
One of my colleagues, Kay McIntyre, did an interview with I think she was a British woman who came over and did the latest book on the Bloody Benders. And I didn't read it, but I heard Kay's show, and it was pretty interesting. That every so many years people go and they try to dig up where the house once stood and all that. And if anybody on this call isn't familiar with the Bloody Benders, just go Google it. It's horrific, really. And you grew up really close to it.
I did. Parsons, Kansas.
Wow.
Now we understand.
Yes.
More than we wanted, perhaps.
He's the culprit.
You get some Southeast. This is what happens when you get some Southeast Kansans together, right? They just.
Oh, but he's reading great stories for our kids out there, aren't you?
But I did wonder. I thought Big Bruce was steam driven, not electric.
No, it's electric. They had to build an electric power plant with a super long extension cord to power that shovel.
Is that the updated Brutus? Because the early Brutus would have been a long, long time ago.
There were smaller steam shovels to begin with, but the one that's on display in West Mineral, Big Brutus, is an electric, and it's the largest extant. Is that the word? The largest existing electric coal shovel. There used to be an even bigger one, but they disassembled it. So now it's like the world's biggest electric coal shovel.
That's between that and the Twine in Cawker City, Kansas is really a hot spot.
Yeah, the problem with Cawker City is it's got qualifiers. It's the largest ball of sisal twine.
The only real twine.
I don't know all the twines there are, but that's the sisal twine one in Cawker
Absolutely.
City.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to add this to your expertise then, okay?
All right. I'll come back next time with Kansas trivia. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, everybody.